Hello, everyone, and inside today's Locked On Canadiens, the Habs tussle with the Panthers one more time, and we have a full prospect update in 3 Up and 3 Down.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1041 of Locked On Canadiens, your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Some terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. We are, of course, available wherever you get your daily podcasts, Google, Apple, Spotify, or if you're watching on youtube.com as well. You're getting a fun visual surprise from me, the person talking in this, if you've paid attention over the last couple of weeks. I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Matlin. I am joined, as always, by the active stick, Laura Saba. And Laura, we took Sunday off. It was Easter Sunday, so we wanted people to spend time with their families, going into this here. But we've got actually a lot to get into. Discounting the fact that we didn't talk about them losing to the Hurricanes because it was a game where
I don't want to talk about that.
No, I couldn't tell you much of what happened in that game, and I was watching it in front of me while I was playing D&D with some people, and I could not tell you anything that happened in that game whatsoever at all, except for Kotkaniemi didn't score, so I guess it's a win at the end of the day.
Yeah, I was actually literally watching that game and not doing anything else. I literally was focused on that game, and I don't want to talk about it.
And that's fair, because we won't. And we're going to talk about
old news anyway. This is the Tuesday episode. We are looking ahead to the Panthers game, and we thank everybody for, I guess, your patience with us. But it was a holiday, so we were not going to work on a holiday, and we hope that you did not have to either.
Yeah, and now I'm kind of looking at what's ahead here. And the Panthers have been a bogey team for the Canadiens for a couple of years now, and not really getting any easier. They're sitting at 99 points. They're one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. One of the top teams in the league. They're the 7th best team in the league based on points standing there, whereas the Canadiens are 15th in their own conference, 2 points behind the Senators, 7 points behind the Sabres, which great for the tank, all things considered. I feel slightly stressed about this game, but also I look at how the Canadiens have played some of these top teams after the NHL trade deadline. They played the Oilers very well. They've played, they beat the Avalanche. They beat Seattle, not a good team. They beat a Flyers team desperate to try and solidify their playoff spot there. They've kind of proven that, hey, we can be and keep up with good teams here. I'm curious if that can apply to this Panthers team that is just deep, nasty. They played them well last time. I believe it was a shootout loss the last time they played the Panthers. And you know what? If you're going to keep up with a team, I'd rather you show that effort there. Make the Panthers earn it. And the last time I said this, I think it was around this time last year, they played that really stupid game that had like 9 goals in the first period. And I thought my computer was just going to burst into flames. I'm not really sure what I kind of expect out of this one, but keeping it close is what I would consider a benefit, honestly, going into this right now.
Well, that was the thing, because I think, the last few games we were really hoping that there would be no shenanigans. And there was, there were still some shenanigans, but it's narrowing down and it's becoming more serious games, because this is a team that is poised to make the playoffs. They want to make some noise after last year getting to the final. They really want to prove they weren't just like a one-off, and they are a team that, as Scott describes, they're annoyingly good. So you definitely want to hold your own against them. But this is the kind of thing where you have to be particularly careful. You don't want to be undisciplined. You don't want to let things get out of control. And you really want to do that thing where you try and play toe to toe with them. You try and keep up with a better team. That's where the energy should be. It should not be lost in shenanigans. I keep saying the word shenanigans, but you know exactly what I mean when we're talking about Panthers games.
Yeah, and I'm looking at their roster right now. Sam Reinhart leads the team, 51 goals, 35 assists. Matthew Tkachuk, 23 goals, 56 assists. Alexander Barkov, 21 goals, 50 assists. Ton of points, and Tkachuk is out there to just be a nuisance. And he's not even leading the team in penalty minutes. Sam Bennett has 96 penalty minutes and 34 points on the season. Jonah Gadjevich has 95 penalty minutes. Tkachuk has 82. Lomberg has 74. Ekman Larson has 72. Like, they're a team that will bring that physicality to you. And I'm kind of looking up and down the roster. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players with double-digit goals. Ekman Larson has 9. Anton Lundell has 9. That they're not far off from having a lot of players with double-digit goals here. They're an annoyingly deep team. And the thing is that they play a style that is so 2011 Bruin-esque that you could win these games with skill if you wanted to, and you kind of keep turning it into, well, what if I just try to break your knees instead? And my biggest thing is, let nobody get hurt in this game. This is I don't want to say meaningless, but it is mostly meaningless for the Montreal Canadiens that play hard, play, smart, stay out of the box because this Panthers power play will kill you. Sam Reinhart has 27 power play goals out of his 51 this year. I don't want to say power play merchant, but kind of in this case, but we know discussing 50 goal scores is a sensitive topic these days. I just don't want anybody to get hurt. And that includes potentially Christian Dvorak now, who I thought was definitely done for the season. At least that's the way it was made to seem earlier this year. But apparently he's now day-to-day, and it is not a April Fool's joke like I thought from both the Canadiens media and the Montreal Canadiens themselves.
I mean, that would be really cruel. That would be kind of horrifying if they were making a joke about an injury. I think, like, for official team stuff, a trade or an injury is off limits for April Fools. But anything else, that to me is allowed. But either way, I also thought he was like in recovery, and it was going to take until August before he could even get back on the ice or get back to contact hockey. So this is good news for him. He's probably, really desperate to get back into action. So I really hope that he is able to play sometime soon. And in the meantime, I think the biggest thing is, like, you've got so few games left. You just have to basically survive them without a catastrophic injury so that you can make the most of a long off season. You can get in shape and come back. Because next year, I really think that next year the Canadiens are going to, the expectation from the front office is going to be that these players are going to try and challenge for a wild card spot. And I don't think the organization is going to accept any less from them.
And I'm looking here is that everywhere, NHL.com, ESPN, the NHLPA is, the team announced that he will miss the rest of the season with a torn pectoral muscle. And I'm just trying to figure out, he was injured. They announced this January 4th in the new year. And we are April 1st. That's what? January, February, March. That's 3 months. And again, this is not, maybe it wasn't as torn as bad as they thought, or that the rehab went really well. Usually I think a torn muscle, 4 to 6 months at least. They said he's day-to-day, so I assume they're not rushing him back in. But there's the potential that he is available. What that means for this roster, I don't know, because the only option is, I believe, is to send Joshua Waugh down to the AHL, and he is also currently injured. So I'm very curious how they shift things around to, fit him in here and make this all work right now. But going back to this whole point here, I assume Samuel Montembeault will get the start here, which is nice. It is against his former team. He usually comes out and plays pretty well against them. And the Panthers are going for the President's Trophy again. So they're going to come out full strength. They're going to probably play Bobrovsky. I would envision they would play Bobrovsky anyways. If not, I think this Habs team has shown they have enough backbone and bite in their game to make it interesting. I also think that a guy like Arbor Xhekaj or Michael Pezzetta is just raring to get the gloves off at this point, just because losses breed frustration in some places, which also means somebody is going to get punched in the face by a much larger Albanian Czech Canadian. If I have his heritage correctly there. And to be quite honest, I don't think any of them should actually want that smoke. It's a bad idea. I think the Panthers are coming out on top here, but my hope primarily is that the Canadiens show us something. Continue to show us what you did last week against good teams. We know you are capable of that. Don't do the roll over and die thing and leave Montembeault out to dry like you did last year. Laura, any parting thoughts?
Just don't die. That's
Well,
it. Just don't die.
Well, they didn't go to Florida, so we don't got to worry about that at least. So, but we are going to transition things. Normally we do 3 up and 3 down on Monday. We kind of have our down segments and our up segments. A lot of good stuff coming in this week. We're going to talk about the Rocket playoff picture and then kind of get into the non-professional prospects and everything coming up after this. And we are, of course, past the halfway point of the NHL season. The playoffs are right around the corner, knocking on the door. Literally 19 days away from the day we were recording this episode. And regardless of the current standings and everything else, we want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL Network. And you want to know why? Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you got to do, you can bet on things like the NFL, the NBA, MLB, college football. There's a group chat functionality. All you have to do is pick whether the stud players. Is Ovechkin going to keep his goal scoring up? How many more goals is Matthews going to score this year? He just scored 61 tonight. Can Crosby drag the Penguins kicking and screaming somehow in the playoffs? Nathan McKinnon, etc. will record more or less in their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, or more in a given game. And to win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you have to nail the outcome of 8 player stats. That's 100 times your money playing fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So nail your picks and win big. All you have to do is use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, and those who know us know that Monday is 3 up and 3 down. What's good? What's bad? What's everything in between here? I didn't really want to focus too much on any of the down stuff. We know the Canadiens lost to the Hurricanes on Saturday. No one is perturbed by that because I didn't see any sort of reaction after the game was over whatsoever. And I don't think it is a lack of caring or anything like that. I just think that it's kind of like, they lost. Okay. And everybody moved on with their lives. I guess what we should do, Laura, is transition. I'm wearing my Rocket jersey here, and people keep asking about that. Someone asked me on Twitter today is, how do the Rocket have a magic number of 15 with 6 games left to play? The magic
number includes the losses that your opponents also incur.
And that was exactly, I was going to answer that on the show here just because I got asked that a lot. They have 6 games left, so 12 total points that they can earn themselves. Whereas the team chasing them, the Belleville Senator, has 16 possible points left. They have 8 games, 2 games in hand on the Rocket, I believe, if I was looking at the AHL standings correctly. And the Rocket coming up have one more out-of-conference game against Springfield this week, and they play Syracuse as well. Yes, the Senators do have 2 games in hand. They are 2 points back, and they also play Syracuse and Springfield this week, but on a flipped schedule. So the Rocket will play Springfield and then Syracuse. The Senators will play Syracuse and then play Springfield. Basically, the way I see it is the Rocket need 4 out of 6 points, or 4 out of 6 games here, and that's Springfield, Syracuse, 2 against Cleveland, in Cleveland, then a home and home against Belleville. They cannot afford to lose the 2 games against Belleville the last week of the season unless the teams playing the Senators continue to beat them and the Rocket can just kind of stay where they're at there. And the biggest thing for that is the Rocket desperately needs some of their star players to step up a little bit. Lias Anderson's been playing very well. Logan Mailloux is getting a lot of offensive points, but there's been some foibles in his game that remind me of him earlier this season here. Not saying it's a bad thing, but a lot of the time I'm watching him try to play with the puck by himself instead of using his teammates. And what that generally ends up meaning is the puck gets deep somewhere, turned over, and he is out of position there. And Jakub Dobeš has been very good, But the Rocket could use an infusion of players, and it's not going to be Owen Beck, unfortunately. And Lane Hutson still, and we will get to this in the next segment a little bit, going to be a ways off and might not be there at all until next season. I guess, Laura, if they don't make the playoffs this year, are we considering this Rocket season a failed thing, despite the fact that we've seen guys promoted to the NHL and seen some really standout performance from young players? It's a very hard thing to balance development, and they're playing well, and we want tangible results for the team as a whole here.
I won't see it as a failure at all, mostly because of the extent of the injuries and its impact on the Laval depth. And so that's my biggest thing. And then individually, I would look at players being put in positions where they're able to succeed, or in the case of somebody like Arbor Jack, I get back on track, things like that. Like I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at what playing in Laval has enabled certain players to do, and I'm not looking at it as a fail. Like I do think that they did squander some of their opportunities earlier in the season when they came out of the gate, and they didn't play they didn't have their foot on the gas pedal. And I think that's the biggest thing. Goaltending was an issue, I do know that, but they squandered that opportunity, because had they built up a base in those early games and they didn't lose so many of them, then the injuries wouldn't necessarily have kicked them out of the playoffs. Like they would still have a pretty good position going into it. So did they squander the beginning? Yes. Is it a total fail? Not in the least. Just look at the development of players like Logan Mailloux, for example. Joshua was like now in the NHL. Just players like that you look at and you're like, all right. And Dovish has had an up and down season, but like he's been really solid as of late, right?
He has the Rocket record for most wins in a season. He has 22 on the season, which I believe is top 7 in the AHL. He's one of the top rookie goaltenders. He's played the second most minutes, faced the second most shots behind Jet Greaves of Cleveland. And he did this behind a team that for a month and a half had literally no cohesion at all. And I look at this and go, no matter what, they've really generated some good prospect development, which everyone screamed about for years, is that they're not developing any prospects. Joshua Waugh went from the Rocket to the NHL in about 2 months. You have Jakub Dobiš, who is only not in the NHL probably this year because they had a 3-goalie rotation for 6 months. Caden Primo has stepped up. He counts as a development win for this team. He is a solid NHL goaltender right now. Maybe a few bad starts here or there, but he looks like an NHL goalie. That's development. You have Arbor Jacky, who went down, came back, has seemingly developed into a solid NHL player. Jaden Struble went from the third pair to the NHL in a month and a half and hasn't gone back. And then you're going to see, okay, who's next in this line here? This season, even if they don't make the playoffs, because admittedly their first month was bad. It was unacceptably bad. Worst in franchise history among all the AHL clubs they've had. If they went even in there, won a couple of more games, they're comfortably sitting in a playoff spot right now. And things change, but I'm happy with the way things have gone this year. Is that I would love postseason hockey for some franchise here, because the ECHL team potentially is about to go out of business, which there's a lot behind the scenes that I don't understand there. The NHL team's not making the playoffs. PWHL Montreal is making the playoffs, which is going to be great. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. But I've been to Rocket playoff games. I've watched them on TV. They pack it in for that. And I want to see that intensity. I want to give some of these guys who have had career seasons and rookie seasons that opportunity to play for something there. And I know I'm not guiding anything in this, of course, but they're not far off from doing it. If they can win both games this weekend and Belleville loses both games, the Rocket basically just need to get a couple of points. That's it, and they're in. Yeah, they probably got to play Toronto in the first round, which is a nightmare all in of its own, but it's doable. It's absolutely doable. They're in the driver's seat. They just need to, quite frankly, just keep winning games. That's all that anybody's asking right now.
Also, I don't necessarily believe in moral victories, but I definitely don't want the Belleville team of all teams winning games, or making the playoffs. Of all teams, the Sens.
No, and because like a playoff game in an arena that gets like 2,000 people on a given night is boring. Plospel packs in 10K people per game, and it's a riot. Like, not literally, but maybe, but not literally. We are going to move on. We've got other prospect stuff to touch on. The top prospects are top prospecting in a lot of different ways here, and a couple of surprises from Europe as well. And we're going to get into all that and more coming up next. And right now, folks, the sports calendar is absolutely loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action because right now, new customers get $200 to use in the NCAA tournament, the MLB, the NBA playoffs right around the corner, the NHL playoffs are right around the corner. Golf season is upon us for those of you who like that sort of thing. That's $200. All you got to do is just visit fanduel.com/lockedon. That is LOCKEDON and make your first bet a big win. That's with us here at Locked On and FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast. We're going to wrap up this prospect thing here with, well, as I said before the break, the top prospects are top prospecting. The Frozen Four is set. There are, making sure I have this right, 3 Habs prospects playing in this. Lane Hutson, Luke Tuck, and Jacob Fowler have advanced to the Frozen Four. Rhett Pitlick and Luke Middlestat were eliminated by BU over the weekend. It was a fantastic week of hockey for a lot of teams. Boston College looks absurdly good. They were almost eliminated, but they came back. They got the win in overtime. BU handled Minnesota pretty easily, but in a good back and forth game there. So what that means right now, for everyone who wants to be on Lane Hutson watch, including us here, because Lord knows we deserve a little bit of a treat after this season. The next game for Boston University is April 11th. That is 10 days from now. If BU loses in that game and is eliminated from the Frozen Four, there are 3 Habs games left on the schedule at that point. That would mean, I believe they play on the 13th as well. And I just want to check the schedule for the Rocket as well to see when their final games are. They play on the 11th in Cleveland. They play Saturday the 13th in Cleveland. So that Thursday night game would be potentially the last game there, which means, yeah, he could join the team in Cleveland, and then he would be there to play Friday and Saturday the 19th and 20th against the Belleville Senators to end the season. We are assuming, though, that he is going to go right to the NHL roster if he does sign. You might see Luke Tuck in there. But the way BU's playing with some clutch goals from guys like, obviously, first overall pick, Macklin Celebrini. I almost called him Nate Hudson for some godforsaken reason. Lane Hutson, his brother Quinn Hutson, who's also playing really well right now, have been scoring timely goals there. And Jacob Fowler just set a record in the NCAA for most wins by a freshman netminder, beating Montreal Canadiens legend and man of 10 goals against Al Montoya. When I say the top prospects are prospecting, they're doing the damn thing right now.
And it's so exciting, not just because there's a possibility that we might see Lane Hutson, but also just everything that they're accomplishing right now, particularly with him. Like the Canadians have had a pretty good last few years with NCAA like standouts, I think. And you're seeing those guys then show up and contribute here or in Laval, depending on, what the situation is. And for me, like, I'm not just looking at this as a single tournament. I'm looking at this as the culmination of 2 years of growth in a couple of cases. So I don't know. It's exciting to me no matter what, but definitely, I would love to see Lane Hutson here sooner rather than later, but it's better for his development to see the tournament through.
And that's the thing is that I would love to see BU win it all. And, he gets to lift a trophy and then joins the Montreal Canadiens afterwards, even if it's in the summer, goes to like Worlds for the US or something. That's still a good option. Of course, I am greedy and would love to see, Lane Hutson in a Habs uniform. It's not the same as Caulfield because unfortunately there won't be a playoff run for him to join the team with unless he goes to the Rocket, of course. But it's nice to be excited again. Owen Beck is absolutely lighting up the OHL. in the playoffs to the surprise of literally no one. Lauren, if you're listening to this, yes, we are praising your favorite team of all your favorites right now. I don't know what else I can say about him. He left Peterborough, went to Saginaw, and then was just like, I'm just going to do everything myself now, and is just absolutely lighting the world on fire. For someone to get excited.
Sorry, because like wasn't the knock on him, in his draft year as well as the year following or the beginning of the year following before his trade was that Owen Beck doesn't do enough of being the guy who does everything. And now
And
there he is doing exactly that.
I'm looking, I have his elite prospects page pulled up. 25 games, he had 30 points with Peterborough this year before he was traded to Saginaw after the World Juniors tournament. He had 51 points in 32 games with Saginaw and has 6 points in 2 playoff games so far. Last year in the playoffs, he had 16 points in 22 games for the Petes, doing everything he could to drag them forward. And he had 6 points in 10 games with Mississauga the year before. In terms of people that I think everyone's very excited about this player, but it's also they've kind of fallen into the realm behind, who are we drafting this year? David Reinbacher's come over. Lane Hutson's really good. Uri Slavkovsky has taken that next step. Everyone's not paying attention to just him and Hudson now as the people from that draft class. They're looking at now Uri Slavkovsky as they should have. And I realize, yes, I am forgetting Philip Machar, which is unfair of me. Speaking of people who have fallen
I was going to say
into the void of everything after that. He has 6 points in 2 playoff games as well, and 52 points in 45 games with the Kitchener Rangers this year after 9 points at World Juniors. It's unwise to count against some of these players here, and we haven't even gotten to Europe. Yeah, just don't forget about it. Machar, I think, is going to be a great Rocket player next year. Yeah. Honestly, I think he's going to be a really good fit there.
I agree. And I think he's excited. I feel like there was a little bit of disappointment this year when he didn't make the Rocket, because I think that was kind of, it's not like the Canadiens were leading him on or anything, but it was definitely a distinct possibility. And I think there was a bit of disappointment for him to have to go back to the OHL. But I think this was the right thing. And he's going to be, like you said, a phenomenal Rocket player next year.
And we, again, transition to people that kind of forgotten and everything else there. Oliver Kapanen's lighting up the League of Playoffs right now for Kalpa in that 20 years old or 21 years old. He is the forgotten guy over there because you had Engstrom. People were focused on Bogdan Konyushkov, Adam Engstrom, David Reinbacher, and he's quietly going about his business, having a really solid year. And someone that it's like, hey, this is a real potential entry-level deal guy next year to restore some, depth to the Rocket roster. Everyone's focused on Adam Engstrom and Rogel, who upset, their rivals out in the Swedish playoffs. They're focused on that and forgot there's another prospect in that region of the world. Yes, Sweden and Finland are not the same. Please do not yell at me about that. I know they are different places. I'm so excited that, yeah, the Canadiens prospect pool lacks that superstar. Like I look at the Sharks with Will Smith being as good as he is right now. Some of the young guys that they have in the CHL, hi JD, some of the younger guys coming into this draft, they didn't get Bedard. They're not going to get Macklin, Celebrini, etc. But there's so many good pieces here that it becomes like the debate. 1 or 2 superstars versus a team of just solid, good players on every single line there. We've seen the Canadiens with a lineup like that in the playoffs beat the superstar-laden team of Toronto. And yeah, they lost to Tampa because sometimes eventually it might come down to coaching, in which, John Cooper is good at his job and Sheldon Keefe is not. I'm excited about the future here. The OHL playoffs are continuing right now. The CHL playoffs are on. Highly recommend if you want to watch a guy like Caden Lindstrom or Berkeley Catton play, tune in late night, brew a cup of coffee and do that, unless you're, Laura, myself, and then don't brew a cup of coffee at 9:00 at night. Frozen 4 begins again on April 11th. Patrick Bexell at Zeb Habs has all your European highlights that you're ever going to possibly need. Highly recommend tuning in for that. I have all your Rocket stuff when they're back in action this week. Laura, do you have any parting thoughts before we finish up the show today?
See you at the PWHL game, whoever's going.
I was going to say, you have tickets to the one at the Bell Center, correct?
I do. Yes, that's the one we were talking about earlier. They sold out so soon, and it was crazy because I had a friend who had like fingers in all the pre-sales and only managed to get 4 tickets. And we were in the nosebleeds, but we'll see you at the game. Come say hi. Go there.
Get a Shin showed at the Bell
get
Center.
A show.
Get a Shin show.
Nobody has ever called it that. Nobody in Quebec has called it that ever.
Yeah,
It's
well, I don't.
like, or a steamy.
I'm not calling it a steam A because that sounds like something vulgar and gross or anything. We're going to wrap up the show here. Remember to follow us on Twitter at @LO_Canadiens, LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com if you have longer questions. We will see you all next time after the Panthers game. Thanks for tuning in, and adios.